We're talking about problem solving, and problem solving is something that is the key, actually, to happiness on earth. If we get it right, it means a lot. And if we get it wrong, it means tyranny. And what am I saying is the difference between getting it right and tyranny? Tyranny means a homogeneous unity implied to our knowledge vis-a-vis reality. And this implication is not justified because our knowledge is dualistic. It is inescapably dualistic. And because it is, it demands differences. It demands opposites. It demands the ability to synthesize opposites, not simply the ability to penetrate reality and all of its data and come up with a homogeneous understanding of what reality is all about. Reality is one, but our knowledge of it is many. So what is the mistake that is often made? It is that there must be power to solve problems, and that power is maximized if one person has it, if it's a single source. Perhaps that single source is a religious one, or perhaps that single source is a dictator. But wherever you find this tyranny of the single idea over reality, you find tyranny. In the place of the single idea, there has got to be an ability, first of all, to deal with the data by which we know reality, deal with the facts by which we know reality, and correspond our understanding to the opposites that these data inevitably present to us. Wisdom, therefore, does demand power in the solution of problems, but that power can be falsified when the power thinks that a homogeneous answer is what is demanded. That power must reconcile itself to the fact that the understanding that it has of reality by its own concepts, its own assessment of what that reality is all about, is going to be necessarily a system or systems of opposites. And the real challenge is, how do you synthesize these two things, or these many things of which reality consists in our knowledge of it? This, then, is the challenge that faces America today. America must recognize that its solutions to problems of geopolitics are going to be counterbalanced and must be counterbalanced by opposing systems of geopolitics. It must be recognized by the churches, by the religions, and the religions must recognize that what is found in their scriptures, that what is found in their theologies, that what their magisterium pronounces is of course of great value, but they are differing algorithms by which reality is understood. And when they presume that their understanding is adequate, then there is tyranny. Because each religion must recognize that the reality that they seek is transcendent. It transcends every idea about it, making a synthesis of opposites utterly necessary if wisdom is to be achieved and happiness attained. We live in a world of opposites. We're uncomfortably aware of that in America. We recognize the fact that there are other ways of thinking, and those ways are opposed to our own. And no matter what changes we make, opposites will continue to exist. And this presence of opposites means a great deal. It means a great deal in terms of problem solving, because if we recognize the importance of opposites to valid problem solving, our lives can be happy. But if we don't recognize that and seek a homogeneous unity between data that really, in truth, does not exist, we have paved the way to tyranny. And it's not just in terms of nation building, of nation development, that this recognition of opposites, this recognition of problem solving and what it demands of us is important. As a Catholic, I'm aware that the Catholic Church has a history of imposing its own ideas upon reality and demanding that others simply go along, so that a homogeneous unity is part of the background of my church, and yet my church is far more than a mistake in problem solving, although it certainly is guilty of this. But the Catholic Church can be hampered in its need or its desire to sort of make incarnate the divine love of God in human society. It can be hampered in this if it has the wrong vision of what knowledge is all about and the necessary reality of opposites that must be reflected in our knowledge. Because reality, of course, is one. God is one. But our knowledge of this one God, our knowledge of this one reality is never and can never be adequately expressed by the one. A one always eliminates a large part of the reality of which we speak. And so because of this, it is a tyranny when this false vision of reality becomes incarnate in our world. The ideas behind artificial intelligence means an arbitrary search through data in order to find a magical problem solver. And this works in a way because these algorithms that we can find in knowledge in artificial intelligence take data and allow us to select data, and in selecting them create an organic problem-solving process that is very, very effective, very difficult to counter. And yet, what we are saying here is that this process of taking a single algorithm and pretending that it is an adequate directive for problem solving is very, very tyrannical in what it says and what it does. So therefore, it is going to be only by recognizing first the power, the almost divine power of these algorithms, that we are going to be enriched, because the algorithms, the selection of data, the organic creation of a tool to solve problems works, and it does create this tool. On the other hand, inevitably, the pretense of homogeneous unity is false, and therefore the problem solving is going to impose tyranny rather than health and happiness. The artificial intelligence, then, stands before us as needing the power of the individual to stand above the differing algorithms and not to select between them, but rather to synthesize them, to bring the differing algorithms together in a productive unity or synthesis, a synthesis in which the differences remain. What? How does a unity get created without destroying the differences? Well, look at a family, look at sexuality, man and woman coming together in a successful marriage, in a happy marriage. It can be joyful and beautiful beyond belief, but only if it's a synthesis of opposites that recognizes the difference between the opposites, protects that difference, and yet finds productive harmonies where they are possible. Therefore, what we're talking about here is something of great value. It is the ultimate safeguard against tyranny, and it is at the same time the ultimate guide towards health and happiness. It is, I repeat, synthesis of opposites rather than a false unity. A very basic question is, what do you do with opposites? Opposites. Well, what do you do with differing religions? I'm Catholic, you're Protestant. We're Christian, you're Jewish. What do you do with opposites? Do you select between them, or do you reconcile the differences in what we might call a synthesis of value? That is the essential question. And what is painfully evident is that the world today is opting for a selection between opposites rather than for a synthesis of them. And so we have religions, each of which proclaim that they are the chosen and that the others are not. And we have races in which it is loudly proclaimed that one race deserves the prize while the others do not. And therefore we have things like cultures, all kinds of different organizations in society, each of which realize a transcendence in its own unique and limited way. And in its own unique and limited way, it must exist to express transcendence. But in its own unique and limited way, it also, by its very existence, is a threat to that transcendence which it denies or to which it is blind. And so the question of opposites opens our thoughts to what is behind opposites. What is behind the transcendence that we experience in opposites? Because indeed, when we are of one religion, we sense its unique value, its unique claim to our adherence. At the same time that we sense that, we find that it puts us in an adversarial relationship with people in other religions. So what is this transcendence that underlies opposites, that in some way or other makes opposites absolutely necessary? But then, as it makes them necessary, it commits us to an adversarial relationship between them. It commits us, does it not, to war. So is transcendence an invitation to war? Is the nature of reality such that we are called to fight and destroy others so that we might ourselves live? Or is reality something far richer than that? Is reality a matter of an ascent through opposites constantly synthesizing, constantly bringing together masculine and feminine, negative and positive, acid and alkali, constantly bringing opposites together in new creations all the time, each of which will set up a new adversarial relationship with something in reality, each of which then is calling us into an endless series of syntheses, an endless rebuilding of creation. So, what we're really talking about is the nature of God, the nature of transcendence. Transcendence, God, is either an endless call to war or an endless call to synthesizing, building reality. We are either called to a defensive effort to destroy everything that threatens our own understanding of the divine, or we are called to constantly expand our vision of the divine by synthesizing what we have with what someone else has. And so, therefore, the unity continually grows and becomes richer. This is the essential issue that society must grapple with. If, as it is today, we are a world at war, we will never get beyond where we are. We will only destroy. If, on the other hand, we are involved in an effort to rebuild reality, to rebuild it in accord with a sensitivity to transcendental invitation, if we are called to image through our own creativity, the creativity of the divine, if we are called to image God in our own activities, then our relationship to opposites is going to be something far different from the paranoia which demands that we destroy others lest they destroy us. It will be a call to constantly seek syntheses, new creations with opposites. The centrality of transcendence in our life view is a very important thing to emphasize. Without transcendence, we are limited to the individual experience of good and evil. But with transcendence, we recognize that the individual experience both expresses and limits that orientation to the divine. So the experience of transcendence that is in everyone is the key to the world ethic. If we recognize that experience of transcendence, we recognize that in everyone there is this grasp of the divine. And that grasp must be respected It is the basis for the lives of each of these people, and they cannot let it go. But at the same time that that is true, transcendence means that each limited experience of transcendence must become open to the limited experiences of transcendence in others. That means that conflicts, which are inevitable between differing experiences of transcendence, conflicts are not only inevitable, conflicts, differences are essential to reality. And it is through dealing creatively with these conflicts that reality ascends, and what is immanent becomes more and more an image of what is transcendental, what is divine. So that means that differences in religion, in race, in your civil culture, differences between men and women, differences between Oriental and Occidental nations, differences between English and German, differences between Jewish and Arab. All these differences pose problems. Indeed, they do. And yet, it is solving these problems that is the pathway to an ascent. It is a pathway to becoming what we must be. Because each experience of transcendence has something magical, mystical, mysterious about it, and we cannot simply set it aside. And at the same time that that is true, each experience of transcendence is going to limit us and make it necessary for us to go beyond the single experience and synthesize opposites. This is so basic. It defines our understanding of what God is. Is God a dot against which all of the other experiences of life are militate, so that life is basically a matter of defending a dot against alternative expressions of transcendence? No, the divine is what is underlying all of these differing experiences of transcendence, but it underlies it in such a way that it is a very difficult and challenging thing to bring the differences into a new harmony and to make the differences productive of new and productive tensions. This is central to reality. It is central to religion. Now, in religion, basically we hear that God has given us this particular content, and so therefore it replaces any other content, and it makes any other content not only uninteresting, but really an offense. that must be done away with. But we're saying something quite different. We're saying that in the relationship with transcendence, each person, each race, each group, each nation, we all have our unique hold on the divine. But if we attempt to simply stand pat on that hold, we will destroy ourselves and others. But what we are called to do is to constantly respond to that invitation that is in the life experience, the experience of transcendental invitation that calls us beyond where we are, not to deny what we have been, but to become more constantly in a constantly developing synthesis by which reality is truly expressed. I'd like to think today with you about how religion and philosophy intersect. And they intersect for me in dialectics. Dialectics means that out of opposites comes, or can come, an assent. And that is what we will talk about right now. That out of opposites in religion, out of opposites in race, out of opposites in sex, out of opposites in anything, because they're all over, everywhere, out of opposites can come an assent. And what do we mean by an assent? We mean that instead of destroying reality, we build it. So dialectics, in a sense, is where religion and philosophy unite. Now, in religion, for example, I'm Catholic, and I believe various things according to my religion. And that means that I accept as true some of the things that my religion tells me is true. And this is very helpful in a way. But at the same time that it's helpful, it's also a problem. Because over the course of time, some of these ideas about what must be done, about what must be the reality, do change. For example, the birth control issue is one of these, and for quite a long time it was just taken for granted by Catholics that birth control was wrong. And then 60 years ago or so, there was quite a movement in opposition to that. And many Catholics began to think, well, there's a dialectic here. The old vision of birth control focused upon the need to be open to procreation because that was giving a depth dimension to this thing that you don't want to deny. And yet, 60 years ago, many Catholics began to be aware that there was a depth dimension of love that was being denied by the old practice. that made birth control unacceptable to Catholics. So that a differing orientation to morality, a changing orientation to reality, which did not destroy the past, but added to it elements that had to be somehow integrated and then set out a need for rethinking, for a new synthesis that would embrace the old, yet embrace the new in a way that would be helpful to all. There's the same kind of need to accept differences in race. Differences in race at one time suggested that certain races would be master races, other races would be looked upon as inferior. But in time, the error of this vision, the immorality of this vision, which would overlook the beauties of races while coming to a facile kind of evaluation of these races. This was intolerable. And so therefore, a new vision had to take place. And the new vision, ideally, would not eliminate the values of any of the races, but awaken to the differing values of each race, and therefore set up the need for a new synthesis, a wedding of orientations to value that these races could produce, and so one could benefit the other rather than enslave the other. The same thing is true in marriage. No one can doubt the differences between men and women, and no one can doubt that these differences can be very difficult at times to deal with. And yet, it is also quite clear that when they are dealt with well, when the differences are synthesized, when the differing orientations to reality are synthesized successfully again and again in a good marriage, the result is the rebuilding of society. So that in each of these cases, in religion, in race, or in sexuality, we have differences, we have opposites, and the differences and the opposites can destroy religion, destroy race, destroy society, destroy weddings and marriages. But these differences are the key if handled with wisdom. These differences can be synthesized and new things created. And that is what we are called to do. That is what we are called to be. So it would be a great mistake to see religion as a commitment to a single, unchanging way of thinking. It would be a great mistake to see zero-sum games between races as defining race relationships. It would be a great mistake to see man and woman locked in a fierce struggle to control the other, and think that that is the definition of the human experience. Because when it is the definition of the human experience, there is destruction. But when differences are the key to rebuilding reality in a higher and better way, then we have what we seek in religion, in society, in the relations between sexes and races. Jean-Dominique Crossan has rethought the idea of redemption. And this rethinking is encapsulated in the tension between ascension and resurrection. For Crossan, the ascension of Jesus Christ as a unique person is to be distinguished from resurrection, in which Jesus Christ is one with the whole human race. And so ascension means personal glorification of a human being, Jesus, whereas resurrection means a universal conquest of death. Resurrection does not eliminate the value of ascension. Resurrection does not replace the role of Jesus with the universal experience. But resurrection opens the unique experience of a single person to become the universal experience of mankind. And so the Jesus who is the Redeemer is seen in art not simply as the one who ascends, but seen as the one who opens the gates of hell, the gates of death, and brings us to glorious life. Now, this vision of Crossan is a great interest today, because that's basically what's going on. We are beginning to see religion not as merely an applauding crowd watching the antics of a single man, but we are beginning to see it as a universal experience that has been opened up to man by this God-man. So what I'm talking about now is the importance of each person's life. Each of us is utterly unique, and that uniqueness has a place in the whole mystery of what we speak. That unique role of you or of me in this whole panoply of reality, of becoming, of journeying. We are all journeyers. We are all going somewhere. We are all attempting to transcend the death, the emptiness, the imprisonment of life in the freedom of divine life. And so Krassan is talking about something that has immense importance. It's not easy to experience because the prison is a very totally consuming experience, where it can be. And yet the vision is of such magnificent beauty that is worth our attention. The last half of the 18th century and the first half of the 19th century were terribly important years because of what was happening in German and Austrian thought. In the work of Immanuel Kant, reason was seen as the way to go, but reason was bringing us to an awareness of opposites, and what do you do with opposites? And by the middle of the 19th century, the work of Friedrich Schelling had begun to see reality not merely in terms of facts about it achieved by reasoning, but also as an experience of it, an identification with it, that is, achieved by another kind of knowing, so that the difference between epistemologies at the beginning of this period and the end of this period was something quite important. We had, through the work of Schelling and in particular, we were beginning to become aware of a kind of knowing that is not simply a sense of reality that can be measured, but some way of knowing by which we involve ourselves in its becoming, that our becoming becomes a vehicle for knowing the becoming of someone else, of something else, of reality itself. Now, this has a lot to do with art, because if art is merely a reflection of a reality known by facts, it is kind of a subjective flowering of these ideas, the facts that have been established by research. But if, on the other hand, reality is an ascent through opposites, through not only knowing about opposites, but experiencing opposites, then art is going to be something else. And this something else was expressed very graphically by Franz Schubert, because up until the year 1822, Schubert's art was an expression of a reality known by facts, and these facts could be gleaned from religious faith. But after 1822, Schubert's art had to be something else. If it was going to be at all true to what he had done before 1822, then it was going to have to somehow or other justify the beauty that was expressed there. But if he's going to express that beauty, he was also called to enter into the experience of the negative. He had to descend as well as ascend. In fact, the validity of his ascent would be a function of the validity of his descent. And so therefore, there's a big difference between the Sixth Symphony of Schubert, in which there is a joyful anticipation of transcendence. That is distinct. That is different from the Eighth Symphony, and indeed a little bit different from the Seventh Symphony, in which the only way to that transcendental joy is by entering into the descent. A man must die before he is resurrected to new life. So we can take a look at the works of Schubert that he produced after this period in 1822, and we can see that again and again and again, there is first a descent into the tragedy of life, into the tragedy of death, the emptiness, the terror of death. There is that as a condition for an ascent into the beauty of resurrection, of divine invitation. For example, there is the piano trio, Deutsch 929, in which the agony of the wanderer is the condition for his great joy, the first two movements conditioning the joy of the last two. The same thing is true in the piano sonata, one of the first and the second of the posthumous piano sonatas. It's true in the piano sonata in D major, and it's true in the Wanderer Fantasy. Again and again in the works of Schubert, in the post-1822 works of Schubert, there is this entrance into a deep descent into terror and agony. But this is not the end. It is the condition for an ascent that has a validity that has been recognized again and again. That ascent is an experience of divine invitation. John Dominic Crossan is a theologian who once was a Catholic priest like myself and left the priesthood like I did in search of a richer experience of divine invitation. And this richer experience of divine invitation meant a rethinking. It meant a new metaphysics of religion. In this new metaphysics of religion, reality consists of opposites, and the morality consists in synthesizing the opposites. Immorality consists in going to war, selecting between them. There is a way of living, which is a way of reacting to opposites as divine invitations to transcend either one of them in a new and higher harmony, so that there is a tension that becomes productive between the opposites rather than a tension that is destructive. God is seen differently. God is not seen as the single one who is telling you what to do. God is seen as the invisible one beyond the opposites, calling us to work towards their synthesis, work towards rebuilding the universe. So what we're talking about here with Mr. Crossan is a different vision of religion. Yes, Christianity remains. Christianity is seen by Crossan as being revealed by Christ. Christ is the one who refuses to go to war over the opposites and who demands that we create something new in life, just as he created something new in life. Each of us are challenged to do that. Each of us in our own unique way, in our unique part of the universe, at our unique time, with the unique people who are involved in our lives, are called to react to the opposites, react to the tendency to destroy everything by selecting between the opposites, and instead react to the divine presence within each of the opposites, a presence that must be separated from dross, a presence that needs to be integrated with divine presence elsewhere. And so this basically is the new metaphysics, as I see it, that Mr. Crossan embraces. And if I'm right about that, then I would say that we have a great deal in common, because this is the metaphysics that I see as being valid and necessary for true Christianity.